personnel who had crossed over to Zokothar in Mizoram yesterday have been flown to Tammu across Moreh by Indian Air Force helicopters. The 40 Myanmar military personnel had entered Mizoram with knowledge of Indian authorities after their camps were taken over by allied forces. Indian Air Force's Mi-17 helicopters were pressed into service for transporting the Myanmar Army personnel from the Nalam helipad in Champhai district to Tammu. Well, among those who had entered India were 2 officers of the Myanmar Army and the 38 soldiers and other ranks. Earlier last night, a huge mob had gathered outside the Zokothar police station, where the 40 Myanmar Army personnel were put up after they entered the area amid intense fighting across the borderline. Well, heavy gunfight continued between the Myanmar Army and the People's Defence Force at the Myanmar's Khao Maui, which is just across the Zokothar village on the Indian side of the border. The mob had gathered in front of the Zokothar police station to protest against the atrocities committed by the junta during the ongoing crisis in the neighboring country. And meanwhile, amid the fresh crisis in Myanmar, the Assam Rifles has deployed additional troops along the Myanmar border, not only in Mizoram but also in Manipur, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. And joining me over the broadcast is our editor-in-chief, Wasbir Hussain, from the newsroom. Well, Wasbir, over 40 Myanmar military personnel flown to Tammu by the Indian Air Force, but the situation across the border is very volatile.
Yes, Reshma, basically, this is the big breaking story at this point in time. Yesterday, 2 Myanmar army posts were overrun and taken by fighters from the Chin National Front and the People's Defence Forces. These are the 2 anti-junta forces in the Chin state just across Mizoram. So, these about 80 fighters, about 80 rebel fighters from the Chin National Front and the People's Defence Forces, they attacked 2 Myanmar army posts in the Chin state and overrun 2 Myanmar army posts. Following that, the soldiers, they contacted sources for safety. They tried to flee to safety and contacted the authorities on the other side of the border, that is in India, and they crossed over into Mizoram in the Zokothar area in Champhai district yesterday evening, and they were sheltered by the authorities in Zokothar area after they sneaked, after they fled the place that was overrun by the anti-coup forces, the forces which are fighting in Myanmar for civilian rule, and then this military man, the 40 of them, 2 officers and 38 other ranks, they were sheltered for the night by the authorities near Zokothar. And this morning, starting 9:30, these 40 soldiers of the Myanmar army were airlifted by Indian Air Force Mi-17 helicopters. They were evacuated from Zokothar to Tammu. This is just across Moreh in Manipur. Tammu is the first Myanmarese town across Moreh in the state of Manipur. So there will be at least 3 sorties. The first sortie by the Indian Air Force Mi-17 helicopter began at 9:30 in the morning from the Zokothar area. They were airlifted and they were taken to Tammu. So this is the situation. All the 40 Myanmarese army soldiers who had entered yesterday, they are being evacuated. Some of them have already arrived in Tammu by now, and another sorties as we speak are taking place. The entire evacuation operation from Zokothar in Mizoram to the safety of Tammu in Myanmar are going to take place, are going to end today, because when we asked authorities why Tammu, because they said that Tammu is the only stable area in Myanmar where there is relative calm and there is no fighting going on between the junta and the pro-civilian rule forces, that is the resistance forces. So Tammu is pretty stable at this point in time, and therefore the soldiers were airlifted and dropped in Tammu. Now, this is the breaking story. Let me also tell you, viewers, that earlier this month, a few days ago, 55 Myanmar army soldiers under similar circumstances had crossed over to Moreh area in the extreme south of Moreh actually. They had crossed over to Indian territory, extreme south of Moreh, with the full knowledge of the Indian authorities, and they have also since been already driven back to Tamu in Myanmar. So on this occasion, since they were very close to Tamu, they were driven by vehicles, they were taken in vehicles by the Indian authorities and dropped in Tamu along the border, where they were received by the Myanmarese authorities. So 55 Myanmar army soldiers had entered India under similar circumstances earlier this month, and they have also been safely repatriated to Myanmar. So this is the situation. Now what we are hearing is that after the Three Brotherhood Alliance, the three ethnic rebel armies, they had attacked about 100 military posts in the northern Shan state 15 days ago. The other groups fighting for civilian rule in Myanmar or autonomy in Myanmar, they have got extremely emboldened. And now we can say that this fight against the junta has spread across Myanmar, across large parts of Myanmar. And now we can report that there has been curfew imposed in Sittwe. It's a port town. Sittwe is a port town not far from Mizoram. It's the capital of the Rakhine state, and we are now getting reports that tanks are rolling on the streets of Sittwe, where there is a curfew being clamped. So this is the situation in Sittwe, and now what we are hearing is that the 80 fighters who had attacked the two Myanmar military posts in Chin state yesterday, they belong to the CNF, the Chin National Front, and the largely civilian mercenaries which have named themselves the People's Defense Forces. Now what we are hearing is that the CNF, the Chin National Force, is trying to consolidate its hold along the border in new territories along the border with India. Now, as we have reported yesterday, the Three Brotherhood Alliance, the conglomeration of three ethnic groups, they have attacked the Myanmar army, pushed them under defensive, took control of a strategic border trading point, putting the Myanmar army on the defensive. That was in the eastern Shan state, and the operations and the attacks took place as close as 2 kilometers from the border with China. And we have reports that some of these refugees who have fled the fighting have also crossed over into China. Now, emboldened by this coordinated strike by the Three Brotherhood Alliance that began 15 days ago, the other groups like the CNF, the PDF, etc., they have also intensified their attack, as we have seen yesterday in the Chin state border just across Jokhatar in Mizoram's Champhai district. Now, the CNF is planning to gain as much territory, take control as much territory as possible from the junta, but this time along the border with India. So these are developments that have taken place. So this is a very big development right on our border that is on the Mizoram border. Now the fighting is basically taking place along the border with Mizoram and along the border with Manipur. The borders with that Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh shares with Myanmar, that side of the border is relatively calm at this point in time, and the refugees are largely only entering Mizoram, and there are already about 30 to 40,000 estimated 30 to 40,000 Myanmar refugees in Mizoram, and since the violence escalated in Chin state in the last 48 to 72 hours actually, about 5,000 of them have since come into Champhai district alone. So this is a big development that's going on right across our border, and Northeast Live is closely tracking these developments. But yes, we can also confirm that Assam Rifles have strengthened its presence all along the Myanmar border, that is in the states of all along the border with Myanmar, that is in the states of Mizoram, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland. Now these four states, northeastern states, share a 1,600 plus kilometer long border with Myanmar, with Mizoram sharing 510 kilometer long border with Myanmar. So this is the situation. There is large scale artillery fire going on there. There has been airstrikes. Yesterday, as we have reported, on the border with Thailand, a Myanmar military jet has been shot down by another rebel group, but a government run news agency said that the aircraft had developed technical snags and that the two pilots had ejected to safety. Now in this kind of a scenario, it is extremely difficult to get exact reports from the ground. Northeast Live has been trying to contact authorities in neighboring Myanmar, but to no avail. We have not been able to get responses from the authorities in Myanmar. But news agencies, local news agencies in Myanmar are saying that the resistance forces are on a sweep across large parts of Myanmar, trying to put the military, Myanmarese junta on the defensive. And this is the worst reverses that the Myanmar junta, Myanmar military has suffered in recent times, or for that matter, it is the worst reverses that the Myanmar military has faced since the February 2021 coup, where the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi was overthrown in that military coup. And of course, the situation, the economic situation in Myanmar is absolutely not good at this point in time. There's foreign exchange crunch. There has been economic sanctions on the country and corruption rampant. And in this kind of a situation, when a rebel army is attacked, they combine, launch coordinated strikes or launch independent strikes, it becomes all the more difficult for a regime that is facing a lot of opposition from both the civilians as well as the armed groups who are in open revolt against the military junta at this point in time. Reshma.
Well, indeed, it's a big development coming in from the borderline, wherein after the crisis, the Myanmar crisis and the massive influx of the refugees in Mizoram, the all four states, as you mentioned, like the Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland, Mizoram, the vigil has been tightened by the Assam Rifles.
Absolutely, absolutely. The Assam Rifles have maintained vigil. They are closely monitoring the situation across the border. The Assam Rifles officers are also meeting local villagers on the Indian side, but living close to the border. They've been sensitizing them on the need to stay indoors, on how to deal with if there is a fighting very, very close to the border. So Assam Rifles is on the job. They've strengthened their presence. A lot of additional Assam Rifles columns have been deployed along the 1600-kilometer long border that India shares with Myanmar in the northeastern region.
Well, thank you for joining us over the broadcast. And indeed, viewer, it's a big developmental story coming in from the region and as well as from the neighborhood focus. And we have reactions from Mizoram IGP Lal Byangthanga Kyangte on the entire development.
Sunday evening, this PDF of Myanmar